So, I showed this image in my last video, and I talked about it briefly, but I'm going to give a quick and simple explanation to what this is and why it matters. This is a depiction of our current income tax system, and why it perpetually bleeds the country dry of all value, giving all that value to the government, which is incompetent and wastes all that money, also is corrupt and hoards all that money, giving it to their allies who give it back to them, and all of our representatives become extremely wealthy while the average person becomes extremely not. You have to work 10 years with strict savings to be able to put a down payment on a house, which you will then spend 30 years to pay off. Whereas they have 6 houses on a salary that's only twice as high as yours. On average. Again, this is the average. If you're a realistic person in the US, you will never be able to own a house. If you're an average, allegedly middle-class person, the salary that you are making will just not pay for a house in your lifetime. You're going to struggle to get other things that you need, let alone save money. Now, just to preface this graph is explained by this income tax cycle. There is more going on here, but to keep it simple, this is the biggest driver of inflation. So, let's say you're a producer, and you have to pay income tax. So, after your state tax and everything, it gets lower, but we're just going to focus on the income tax, and we're going to just say you're like a middle-of-the-road producer. You're going to end up paying 20% of your money to the federal government. This is 20% of your profits. So, the value of your labor is 80% out of the gate. Most people do not like being cheated. And because you're a producer, you get to decide what your goods are sold for. So you're just going to correct for this. Your goods are now being sold for 130% of their value. And it has to be 130% because you get taxed on that excess value you're selling for, so 130% covers it so that you actually get basically 100% of your value. Now you need truckers to distribute your product. You've sold it to a distributor, or you're in the process of selling it to the distributor, and you need to get it there. The truckers are part of your system, so you're willing to take, let's say a 20% loss. You'll pay 20% of the value of your product to the truckers for them to actually facilitate selling it for you. Now the truckers lose 20% of their value in income tax. So they come back to you and they say, well, look, I'm hauling goods for you, you're making money, and I'm just not getting enough money out of this deal. Like, this just doesn't seem fair to me that, you're making plenty of money, you're getting the full value of your labor, and I'm only getting like 80% of the value of my labor. The government's taking the other 20%. So the money that I have in my pocket, it does not reflect the value that I see that I am contributing. So give me some more. Now, you don't want to go and drop the value you keep to 60%. So, you have a solution. Let's just raise the price of your goods again. Now, as before, the increase has to be offset. So we're just going to say you bump the price up to $170. Or 170%. 170% of the value of the good that you're producing is now the price of that good. And the truckers have been paid. Now your distributors, they need to pay their income tax. So, not only do they need to pay their income tax, they need to pay their sales tax, which applies to the consumer level. So, we're just going to simplify it again and just say 20% for the sake of simplicity. They need to make 20% additional profit. They don't have to go to you to deal with that, but they can just raise the prices locally. So, regardless of what they paid, they offload those expenses onto the product in its markup. So now, at minimum, the profit is marked up another 20%. So your 170 is now like 210%. It's actually more than that. It's two. Brain's not braining good right now. No, it's actually a little less. No, I'm being dumb. Yeah, it's about 210%. We'll stick with that for simplicity's sake. So the price of the good is now 210% of its labor value. Just to make sure that everyone else gets their fair labor value in a very simplified system. So you, the consumer, because no matter where you are in this system before this point, you eventually become the consumer. At the end of the day, you have to spend your money. I mean, you don't have to, but you kind of have to. You can always choose to starve. But you have to go buy those goods that are 210% more expensive. Not more expensive, they're 210% of the price they should be. So 110% more expensive. You also have to pay income tax. So you've already lost 20% of the value of your labor. So you have 80%, and then you need to pay 210%. And again, you get about 20% of the value of your labor after everything is said and done. I haven't been using the exact numbers here, I've just been kind of spitballing, but the 17% labor value is actually calculated with the real math. So it's closer to like 300% actually. Almost 400%. That's only one cycle of this system. Because now you, the consumer, need to make, in my current example, 210% more money. You need to double your income. Again, not 210% more money, 110% more money to be able to buy the products that you want to buy. So you need to double your income. And, well, in order to do that, the producer's going to have to raise the price on their goods. And the truckers are going to want a bigger slice of that value because they're hauling goods and they are also a consumer at the end of the day. And the distributor is going to have to raise their price of the goods, and then the consumer is going to need more money. And hence, you get this. Now, something that's important is this graph is actually incorrect. Like, it's just objectively, this is the state information. And the state information is heavily skewed. See, over here, in the 30s, the government seized all privately held gold, and they also very clearly screwed the entire population during that process because they said, look, gold is only worth $20 per ounce of gold. So you're going to have to sell it all to us at that. And at the time, you could actually buy gold for close to, or you could sell gold for close to $200 per ounce. So that was already just bullshit. But even if we use the state figures, they immediately said, okay, now that we've taken your gold, and we are taking your gold, and we have locked in the value that we will pay you for your gold, we're going to start printing dollars on that gold at $35 per ounce of gold. And this was the start of fiat printing. It only got worse from there. They started printing dollars on up to, or down to 1% of the gold they held. So if they had $1 in gold, they printed $100. It's that simple. And this was after already screwing everyone with the 20%. So what you can do with that is you can actually look at the real world buying power of the US dollar current year. So if in the 30s, at about 50% of the US dollar's value, gold was worth $20 per ounce, we can go ahead and map that and adjust it for the current era gold price. So, according to the gold standard, which the US dollar was attached to for half, give or take, of its lifetime, the US dollar is now worth 0.19 cents. Let's round that up to 0.2 cents per dollar that you have. It's a pretty catastrophic loss in value. And it's fully predicted by the US graph Like, again, this is from the Consumer Index, I believe, is what they base this on. Consumer Price Index. This was fully expected based on this system. In 1910, we adopted federal income tax, and everyone started paying income tax. And what happened in 1910? How would you look at that? I see a sudden drop in the value of the US dollar. A catastrophic drop, even, happening immediately after 1910. I wonder if something happened that year. So, the reason why I say this graph is heavily incorrect is, well, I just explained the gold thing, but as they were buying gold for $20 and then printing dollars based on $35, they claimed that the US dollar had recovered value. As they were printing dollars on less gold, meaning that it had lost value. This little recovery in the Great Depression is actually just not there. That is complete bullshit. That was a government bailout of the entire economy by just throwing money at it until it fixed. And by fixed, I mean until the problem went away, until the problem was masked by everyone just having more money. So, yeah, that recovery period, that recovery spike, doesn't really exist. In reality, it's pretty much been a straight decline since the 20s. And it petered out because we did start using tariffs, and we did start using, in the 30s, we started using tariffs during the Great Depression as well to try to save the economy, and it somewhat slowed down the collapse. Because again, the first thing you get with this system is your producers try to outsource as much production as possible to people they don't have to pay income tax on. So they'll go to China and have a sweatshop produce all of their goods, and they only have to pay the company to produce the goods, rather than having to pay the government for them to be able to produce and sell the goods. So you get massive outsourcing. They produce the goods at like 10% of the cost, and they still get hit with income tax when they sell them, but when you have that much production and production costs, you're going to make a pretty decent chunk of money still. All of this was predicted. The Founding Fathers very aggressively stipulated that you cannot have a federal income tax. If you do, it can only be levied against a single individual organization or person based on clear, definable use of public service. So Amazon could be taxed with an income tax by their use of the roads. They deliver packages, they have people on their behalf driving on the roads. They could be taxed with income tax. You, the worker, could not. The trucker might be able to, but realistically they wouldn't. It would be the company that employs them that gets taxed, based on the original Constitution. Now, the 16th Amendment basically just destroyed that and doomed the nation effectively. I will say this, also. I was going to just leave it there, but it's worth mentioning how you fix this. One, you just don't. And, like, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but this right here, it's dead. I'm sorry, the economy is dead. There is nothing you can do to ever get it back to the power that it had before. You can get into a recovery period, but in your lifetime, you're not going to see the US dollar regain 10% of its value. Which is a whole lot better than less than 0.002% of its value, but it's not enough that it'll actually meaningfully impact your life. And that's why it just continuously gets worse. Everyone opts to kick the can down the road and live a good life themselves, and everyone says, like, the boomers did this. It's all of them. No, it's everyone collectively has been doing it indefinitely, every generation to come after. And it wasn't even the boomers that started it, let's be clear. It was the two generations before the boomers primarily, that voted to, that their Congress voted on their behalf to start income tax. Everyone else just opted not to fix it, because in order to fix it, it was going to hurt. And every time it got kicked down the road, the pain to fix it and the time to fix it increased. Today, the best thing you can do is start the process to get out of an income tax-based government. And that is going to be catastrophic government restructuring, cutting 90% of the current government out, and shifting to tariffs, which is what Trump is trying to do. His policy is the closest to a solution that we've had in the last 100 years. So, by tariffing all other countries at an equal rate, you guarantee a balanced trade. That's the first thing you want to do. A balanced trade will at least stabilize your currency and you'll stop losing money every year. But then you need to actually build into a surplus export economy. Because the only way you see currency growth is if you are exporting more than you are importing. And you need to do that for, basically 100 years. If we maintain a positive export to import ratio for 100 years, we might recoup the value of the dollar. But even then, the federal government has a second infinite money glitch, and that is the Federal Reserve. They commune with the spirits of money and ask the spirits of money how much money they can print, and money always says as much as you want. Everything you want. So, that's why you need the 90% reduction in the government. You have to abolish the Federal Reserve. You have to default on all current loans that are approved through the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a collection of foreign entities that all passively endorse the printing of money under the promise that they will eventually get their money back. Realistically, you have to get off the US dollar, honestly. You have to replace the US dollar with a new currency and start from scratch. But if you're trying to save the US dollar, you have to default on that, which then your dollar is worthless anyway, but yeah. You do those things, and then your economy is absolutely crippled. You still have to go through decades of pain to even get back to the point where you're self-sufficient, where your country is stable. You have to deal with the Great Depression that you are currently in as a Great Depression. You cut back on food. You cut back on quality of food, which has already been done and is being done slowly. It's just a boiling frog scenario where you don't realize it because it takes so slow for the changes to happen that you acclimatize to them before you realize that it has happened. And eventually, you die. Eventually, you cannot sustain yourself in the economy under the new model. Eventually, you can't feed yourself. But that's where the government's stepping in, and, you can't feed yourself, it's okay, we'll feed you. And, it's nice when you can just suckle on the teat of the government, but the teat is tainted. The more that teat gets suckled, the higher the prices go on everyone else. The more people that need to suckle that teat, and eventually no one produces anything, and the teat is dry, and everyone starves together. That's the end game of this cycle. Trump's policy is a smart way to do it. It mitigates the immediate impact of the repair by spreading the recovery over an even longer period of time. With Trump's system, it would take us multiple hundreds of years to recover a portion of our actual currency power. And again, if you don't know, his system is to utilize tariffs to finance the government and bring back trade so that we will actually export goods and produce goods locally. Then to cut off chunks of income tax, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, so that people will keep more of their money, and ideally, this would reflect in less inflation on prices, because if you're keeping more of your money, if everyone is fair, which is unfortunately not the case, every step of this cycle will allow the prices to naturally lean down. Unfortunately, because people are corrupt, most of the people in this cycle will raise their prices because they will say, well, the consumer has more money to spend, so we can charge more. And that's just human nature. The government would have to step in and force the prices to reflect the reduction in taxes. But that would be an increase of state power, which is something that we don't want, because every time the state gets more power, they fuck more things up. It's that simple. So yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. There is no clear, easy solution other than, what Nepal did, and they just said, you know what, we're not gonna have a government anymore, and we'll make a new one. We'll have a new currency. We'll have, I don't know if they fully transitioned to new currency, they were talking about it, but starting over from scratch is the only real solution. No one wants to do that. There are some people that want to do that, actually. I want to do that. I want to clean slate the world and just restart. Not really the world. The world is pretty fucked up, but specifically the US. I would want the US to clean slate so that everyone can start clean, all the systems of the government that are corrupt can just be washed away. But I understand that that will just not happen because the amount of suffering it will bring is less, it's infinitely less than the government, but it is immediate. And people are absolutely terrified of even the slightest bit of responsibility. They like the idea that no matter what they do and how much they screw everyone else, it'll always just kind of balance out with the government screwing everyone else harder. So I will leave you with that very bright future. Have fun out there.